You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
We could grow. We could develop.
As we know that heaven is not a place, and happiness lives in the heart. Long as the world keep turning, our duty is to keep on learning. You heard?
Keep on learning. It's soaking up game. We gon' make mistakes. We gon' go through something. Keep on growing. Keep on soaking up game. If something ain't working, don't be afraid to change.
Greetings to you, and welcome to Real Black Talk with MIB. We are mentors in blackness, and this is our vowel version of talk program that we thought we'd bring to you to introduce you to us, and hopefully you'll get to a point where you're accustomed to seeing us and even look for us on a regular basis as we discuss the issues that are relevant to our community, and hopefully you'll enjoy the program. I'm Brother Wayne. I'm the host of the program, and riding with me is my partner, Brother Maurice. So welcome again to Real Black Talk with MIB, Mentors in Black. We are a mentoring organization. We have a mentoring company, and our goal and desire is to reach our young people and basically to restore original pride back to our youth. We feel that one of the things that's missing in our community is the original pride for being who we are, who are black people. And we have a strong history and a strong legacy, and we try to bring that to our young people through historical documentation and just teaching. We have a curriculum that we put together, and we invite you to give us a call, and we will come to your young people and do what we do. So you check out our website. We can be found at www.mibness.com. So let's get started. Brother, I'll tell you, there's a few things that I want to cover briefly with you, and then I want to get to sort of a major topic. One of the things I want to cover with you is that since we are, our forte really is in teaching of history to our young people, I found a very disturbing historical story this week that I didn't know about. Okay. And of course, if I didn't know about it, I'm pretty sure some of our viewers didn't know about it. And it just goes to underscore the point, though, that there's so much of our history that we don't know, that has been either lost, like Bill Cosby's writes, stolen, or strayed. And as we find out these historical facts, and they are true in every state, just so happened this one happened in South Carolina. Orangeburg, South Carolina. I witnessed a story the other day on the Discovery Channel, maybe it was one of the educational channels, about what happened in Orangeburg, South Carolina in 1968. What happened was, it was during the time, of course, 1968, where the civil rights movement was in its probably momentum phase. And so there are two black colleges in South Carolina, and they're right next door to each other. I can't think of the other one's name, but one of them is in South Carolina State, and the other one is next door to it. And so therefore they had black college students on campus, and they were agitating for their rights during the time. I'm talking about the integration of all of the facilities. Of course, you know about the bus integrations and the integration. So they had been successful, according to this documentary, with integrating just about everything in South Carolina, except for one bowling alley that happened to be down the street from the colleges. And so the students went to the bowling alley trying to integrate it or to attend, and the owner of the bowling alley did not want black people in his bowling alley. They showed a clip of him saying that I have enough customers. I got customers that patronize me 52 weeks out of the year, and I don't need any more customers. And so the students were standing outside of his bowling alley, in a protest mode, and the police officers came and dispersed them. And as they were going back to their college, a few blocks away, someone broke some windows out. It was in the downtown area as they walked through, and someone broke some windows out of some of the buildings on the way back to school. Of course, this caused a problem. And so the next night, they brought in police officers and the National Guard to campus. And so the National Guard and the police were standing across the street from the campus to keep the students on campus. That's what the stated idea. And so the students stayed on campus, but they built a bonfire. Built some, set something on fire that was on campus burning, and they were standing around in protest that they couldn't leave campus. All of a sudden, the police officer decided that the fire was too high, and so they called in the fire department to come and put out the fire. And once the fire was put out, something happened. The story was too ambiguous. They didn't let us really know what happened, but something happened that caused the officers to begin firing on the students.
Didn't it state that something in regards to a fireman said that he thought he was shot at or something?
That's what they always say when these kinds of...
But it could have been a wood, popping, from the...
It could have been anything, but we do know that no weapons were fired on the students afterwards. But anyway, they fired on the innocent students, on the defenseless students, ended up killing 4, injuring about 27.
Okay.
Completely erased from history. Nobody, the gentleman spoke and said even people in South Carolina don't even know that this happened. And this happened in February of 1968. So that was a couple of months before the assassination of Martin Luther King.
Right.
Total quiet story. Nothing, it swept under the rug, so to speak. They even tried to prosecute one of the students. And I can't think of his name now, but he was supposed to have been a friend of Stokely Carmichael,
right,
who, of course, later on became Kwame Ture. Mm-hmm. And because he was a friend of Stokely Carmichael when he attended Howard University, he was supposedly the one that came with the Black Power stuff.
Right.
And they charged him with the crimes, and he even did some time as a result of it. But of course, later his record was exposed after they looked into it and saw how unfair it was. Right. But this is just an example of how our history is completely kept away from us and hidden from us. And if we're adults who are interested in history, just imagine what it's like for your students, for young people.
Right.
They completely are without any knowledge and the history of what has brought us to this point.
Right. And I see a lot of times that, just like you were stating earlier, it goes back to that pride. They attempt to, meaning the media and those individuals that want to keep information from us and our children, they will hide it. And I think that goes back to the hidden colors concept.
Absolutely, and it has an impact because when you don't know what road you've taken to get you to where you are now, it produces a lack of respect for where you are.
Right.
And our young people don't respect the challenges, the suffering, the sacrifices that have had to be made, the injustices that have had to go through in order to get us to this point.
Yes, sir.
And it's not that they don't care naturally, they don't know.
Right.
And that's why it's important that we point out and we teach the historical record to our young people. They need to know it and they appreciate it when it's been taught. One other point I want to share with you before we get to a more meaty subject is a story that takes place on the University of Kentucky's campus. Didn't know this either. The first 2 football players, 2 black football players that were going to play in the SEC were a part of the University of Kentucky's football team. One of them didn't make it to the first game because in practice he was injured, neck injury, to the point where it eventually caused his death. So they actually killed one of the players that was the black players that would have made it onto the field to play at the University of Kentucky. Now this story came out in a written story on one of the blogs by suggesting that also that at the University of Kentucky they have a medical school that is charging black medical school students exorbitant amounts more than they are white medical school students. They're using some kind of grandfather clause to get away with it by suggesting that if your relatives have been to the university's law school, then you don't have to pay a certain amount of money. And so that speaks into us not knowing the history of these universities that we're attending, talking about for athletic reasons.
Right.
And I wonder, you think if we had that information that it would impact some of our decision making?
Right. I think that, like you just stated, that when you have a situation where you don't have the insight or the knowledge, and that's why I feel, and we probably agree on, the ignorance is like a crime, and it contributes to crime, based on ignorance. And just like you're saying, that alumni code, it's like coding, so that's where the civil rights came into being. And I think that if you qualify, why would you be denied access, and why would you be charged more just because of your color?
I'm trying to come up with, and I know you probably are as well, we're trying to come up with what's at the root of the complacency of our community. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's a community that completely is void without the historical record.
Well, I think it's negligence too, because we don't take the pride. I mean, when you take that pride,
Negligence on whose part?
our part.
For not choosing to, but isn't that a strategy that has been used though to create the complacency? Because if you don't have any idea of what has taken place, your motivation is not there.
But we go back and we look at our elders, we look at our leaders. I think that our leaders and our elders and our educated ones that came before us and now, like our doctors, our PhDs, what are they doing to promote the information that we're talking about?
So you're suggesting then in your comment that these persons have found out, these persons do know,
right?
And unlike you and I, we find out and we try to develop a mechanism by which to get this information to our young people, they choose not to do it.
Well, I think that they have been miseducated and trained and formed and shaped in such a way that once they arrive, once they get the status, they think that they have a non-duty to push the agenda that will benefit us.
And I guess that's what's contributing to more and more people, black people in particular, are choosing to criticize the black community as opposed to defending it.
Right.
Because we are getting to the point, and many of us have gotten to the point where we are blaming ourselves for the condition that exists, not really knowing how much effort has been put into establishing this condition that exists.
Right.
And I tend to get into that mode sometimes when I deal with why don't we develop strategies to overcome it? Because I tend to believe that we are brilliant people.
I want to point out that we have that information like you mentioned, but the implementation is staggering as far as us implementing the programs.
Yeah, the implementation. Yeah.
Right, and we're not doing that, and it's just like we keep getting caught up in the cycle of not doing it. It's almost like a deal where you have a person that wants to do better, but they keep finding excuses not to do better.
Okay. That's the complacency I'm talking about.
Right. Yes, sir.
And it's paralyzing. It has a paralyzing impact on our community. Right. But I think what really contributes to it, and this is going to really be addressed here shortly, is what contributes to it is that so many of us, we have developed a different class association within the black community. Right. And that if we're not on this lower class, or the class that this piece talks about as being the permanent underclass, then we don't feel the urgency to do anything, to make any kind of impact on. So we just go along with the present status of things because it's not directly impacting our personal wherewithal. Right. And that to me is a real hurt feeling to take when you consider that we're all in this together.
Well, I think that if we carefully dissect that whole piece as far as what you're relating to, is almost when you get into classism, you almost have the same concept of us and they.
Yeah.
because they have arrived, so they don't have any type of desire to help those that are beneath them. But when they were on the bottom level, before they came or arrived, they took the same approach. They wanted someone to help them.
Because this is what we attribute to the real success of the civil rights movement.
Right.
The real success of the civil rights movement was because we all were in the same boat. The alley bomb, Noah, the black doctor, couldn't sit on the front of the bus.
Right.
And so when the movement came to open society up for black people, it wasn't to open society up for the rich black people or the middle class black people. It was just black people.
Right.
And so therefore, when the boycotts and everything that were implemented to effect the change, the doctors let the people use their cars
Right.
to keep from getting on the buses. And so that was this unity of purpose
Right.
that gave us the most success. And now the question is, how can we get back to unity of purpose again? Because we like to offer that here, is that what will produce in us the unity of purpose that made the civil rights movement so successful? How can we get to the point where even if we don't actually have the same experiences, how can we feel about each other that we have similar, or we in the same boat?
It gets to that thing that we was talking about the other day. Love.
And that's why I knew you was gonna go. That was a perfect setup.
Right.
I love that idea.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a big word,
Yes, sir.
a misunderstood word.
Right.
And we always use it. We have to love one another. We have to love ourselves.
Right.
But what's in place to produce love? I heard someone mention one time that love is really the respect of duty.
Right.
Love is when love is produced when someone is mindful of their responsibility. Because we all know you're a long married man and I'm a long married man, and we know that if our responsibilities go unrecognized, then our relationships are going to start getting real tenuous.
Right.
And so that's usually what causes love to start getting in shaky ground, is that when somebody is not living up to their responsibility.
Right. Financially,
emotionally,
time-wise.
all of the above.
Right. But that goes back to say that, see, because we don't spend time with our brothers and sisters. We have a distance from them, just like the neighbor thing that I mentioned before. If we don't have the neighborly love, like you don't know the person next door on your right, you don't know the person next door on your left, then that causes a kind of friction. And it goes back to, do you have a little bit more than they do? Or do you have a little bit less than they do? Do you have a nicer car? Or do you dress nicer? So look at the envy and the jealousy that could arise based on the fact that you may have a little bit more.
I think our community have adopted the European motto of rugged individualism.
Right.
And rugged individualism is fine when you have all of the institutions are set up to really support your cause.
Right.
So that's fine. You got rugged individualism. That means the banking institutions are set up to support your cause. The educational institutions are set up to set your cause, or to support your cause. And so you can practice rugged individualism. But when you are the minority group, meaning numerically, you're not in the majority.
Right.
Or when you're not the power group, meaning that the institutions are not under your control,
Right.
you can't intelligently practice rugged individualism.
Right.
You have to play as a team.
Right.
And if we don't learn how to play the American game as a team, then we cannot expect for the group and the team to make progress.
I think that when you look at that definition of the American dream, we as a group may not see the American dream through the same eyes as other people.
I don't know. It seems like we bought that American dream concept. And what is it? It's the being able to own the house, and even some people say still the white fence, picket
Right.
fence, and
House up on the hill.
and the 2-car garage with the two, and that's what we are madly pursuing.
Now, are we? Because look at the lower ring. They're actively pursuing what?
The bling bling. I mean, Who are you referring to? The underclass?
Right.
The bling bling.
So that's why you have the drugs?
It's the get rich or die trying mentality that
Okay.
permeates the culture.
Okay.
And they're trying to do it by any means necessary,
Right.
which is a complete deformation of that particular point, that
Right.
particular term. That term was used by Malcolm X to suggest that we have to have revolution by any means necessary.
Right.
Not get rich or die trying or get rich by any means necessary. And that comes from us not having control of the historical legacies of our great people.
Right.
They can put a message out there and then distort it.
Right.
And it gets to our young people in a profane way, as
Right.
opposed to the way that it was meant to get to them, because that's exactly what's going on presently.
Right.
And they'll hit you in the head, and they'll hit me in the head,
Right.
because they see that as just a means by which to get to what it is that they desire.
So what was the concept in scope that Martin Luther King was alluding to when he was saying the American dream, you know, as far as the integration concept?
Yeah.
Did he see that, you know, because he mentioned that he may be integrating
Into
a burning house.
Of course. Now, at that particular time, and I can understand the strategy, we were locked out of America.
Okay.
They had this segregation thing going on.
Right.
We were over here with nothing. They were over there with everything.
Plenty.
And they had the law on their side to keep the separation.
Right.
So the strategy simply was to, well, if we get over there with them, then they won't be able to hold us back from all of the things that they are possessing.
Right.
You know, that's understandable. It was a short-sighted strategy, but it was a strategy nonetheless. Matter of fact, I even think that the strategy was desegregation as opposed to integration.
Right.
Desegregation meant to simply eliminate the laws from making us have to be in our own areas and experience our own realities. Take the law away that does not punish us if we choose to go in on your side of town.
Right.
That's desegregation.
Right.
Integration was what we ended up getting.
Right.
And that was leave all of your things alone
Right.
and come over here with us.
And then we'll benefit from you overall.
Strengthen everything that we already have.
Right.
Lose all of the things that you have, including our schools, including our little downtowns that we had. Every city in this country had a business district that was black. We had one here. We in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was called 9th Street here. And I'm sure you had one in your city. It was a black business district where you could go and do business with the black entrepreneur.
Right.
Well, right now, where is our black business district? We don't have one.
Right.
We've lost that. And in America, which is a free enterprise system, you have to have an economy that supports your neighborhoods and your communities so that you can get to the point where you can employ your people in your community. And that brings us to the big point I want to discuss. Recently, there is a report out, and to just show you just how bad things are, this report went basically unnoticed. And it was an up-to-date of the condition of the black family. This report was done by the Urban Institute, a Washington, D.C. think tank.
Right.
And that's another one we have to address, these think tanks here.
Right.
Because actually think tanks are places where people literally try to solve problems or at least diagnose them or at least analyze a problem and problems.
Right.
And we need think tanks.
Right.
Well, the Urban Institute was a think tank out of Washington, D.C. that was founded by Lyndon Johnson in 1968. I'm sorry, 1968. Well, anyway, they did the recent one, and it was released, and I don't think any news agency picked it up. The condition of today's black family. Is it because we know what the report says?
Well, I think
We know it's not a good story.
you know as well as I know, that's something you want to, like you were saying earlier, kind of sweep up under the rug.
So we know the condition of the black family is horrible.
Right.
We know that we are at an apex in our sojourn here in America where the black family is probably at its worst shape if we define family as most societies define families.
Like two-parent,
Two-parent,
children,
with children,
home,
in a home.
transportation,
Yeah.
clothing, and money.
Matter of fact, the great Amos Wilson, who wrote the wonderful book, Black Power, he says that a family is defined as a mature father and a mature mother committed to each other who bring children in the world to raise them. He put the word mature in front of it. So to have a mature mom and a mature dad who committed to each other to raise children as a family, he says anything other than that is what is called a survival unit. That's a survival unit. So in other words, ever since the first study on the black family was done by Patrick Moynihan in 1968, and he gave all of those ominous warnings about where we were headed as a black family because of the, quote, elimination of the father.
Right.
And how families can't stay intact if father is not there. And so those warnings have come to fruition. The black father is not in.
We're looking at about 70%.
70% of children today are raised without two parents in the black community.
And we experienced it in our classroom environment here and in an alternative school.
Yeah, we worked in an alternative school together, which gave us the impetus to create our company. And we would ask our students to raise their hand if they were raised with their mother and their father.
Biological mother and father.
Raise your hand if you're being raised presently, and this was high school age.
Right.
If you're being raised presently with your biological mother, meaning the lady that had you, and your biological father, meaning the person that produced you. And what was our ratio?
It was oftentimes about 95%.
95% could not raise their hand.
Right.
And this is being doubled, y'all. We're reproducing this because the music is in here, and this is where we want to stop out, have our conversation, is on what's the complacency for? We have got to come up with measures to counter what is a bad scenario.
Right.
That we can't project any good coming from.
Right.
So when you know that there are things that are detrimental to you, you have to check them.
Right.
You have to figure out a way to reverse what is happening to you. And the condition of the black family, we've got to figure out a way to reverse this. And what are some of the things that we should do?
Study why we're in this condition and make all the necessary adjustments so we can perform at an optimum level. And I think that we're not being taught how to parent. We're not being taught how to make a family. We're not being taught how to make a home. We're not being taught how to raise children.
The latest report said here are some of the things that's helping to plague the black family. Mass incarceration. And we talked about that. What's the sister name that's written the book, The New Jim Crow? Michelle
Alexander.
Michelle Alexander. You need to read that book, an excellent book. Michelle Alexander writes and points out, gives us the statistics on mass incarceration. How we are, meaning black men in particular, are being incarcerated at 5 times the rate of white men. And these are fathers. These are people who are being taken away from families now. Also talks about how we are at double-digit unemployment.
So they would say that black unemployment is at 12%, but they don't go in and tell you that the black male unemployment rate is about 29%. I mean,
Easily.
Right.
And we all know how difficult it is, especially I'm talking to the men here. We all know how difficult and literally impossible it is to be a head of a family and not earn money.
And that incarceration concept, that's a ploy to make sure that you get a strike against you, meaning that if you get a conviction, when you go in to fill out an application, it's going to be on that application. So that's their way of discriminating in the 21st century. And it goes back to the Jim Crowism. We have not recognized this ploy. We have not recognized and we have not done anything to counter it.
I heard this from a person say the other night that one of the things we need to do is stop making schools our jails, stop making schools into jails. And of course, a person listening to that wouldn't know what that meant. they would be taken aback. What do you mean making schools jails? Well, we've seen it happen firsthand.
Right.
Because when we were in school, the police would never get called. Rarely would a policeman have to show up at your school.
We had security.
It had a security. If there was a fight that broke out, security broke it up, and they call your parents, and your parents had to come to school and get you.
Now it's police.
Now the police are at the school, so if a fight breaks out, and you know how it is when you start fighting somebody and you try to break it up, well, you're mad now.
Right.
And so you're going to get mad at whoever try to break you up. Well, if you get mad and curse or try to swing while the police are trying to break it up, well, then that's a charge.
Right. A felony.
You get charged with disorderly conduct. You get charged with inciting a riot.
Or battery.
You get charged with terroristic threatening. These are charges that our young people are getting while at school. And that's how they're starting their life of having encounters with police at school.
Right.
You go to school and you catch a charge.
And then that first charge gets you on the path towards crime.
On the path towards crime, because of course you have now these charges on your record, and people go and you say, well, what happened? Well, I threatened a guy while I was at school doing a fight, and they said it was terrorism threatening.
Yeah, which became a felony as opposed to a juvenile charge.
Or just getting sent home from school and told your mama to bring you back to school.
Right.
So they're turning schools into jails where they are constantly, what we say, criminalizing our young people.
Especially black males.
Especially black males, because that's what it also says, is that the suspension rate and trumpet rate of young black males is 10 times that of white students, even for the same crime.
Right. And that goes back to the home. Once again, male and female in the home, being educated in the field of parenting. Once they learn how to parent, they can deal with the issues with their children and their discipline issues. But if they don't know, then they're just acting out of order. The same old cycle.
Well, it's very difficult to parent when you are under the stress of having to meet your bill obligations. It's very difficult to do. That's why Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell, one of my favorite songs, it takes two. It takes two. It takes two people, mature people committed. Because if not, the storms of hard times are going to bust y'all asunder. And so here, what we've got to really do is look into what we're doing with our relationships. How are we developing these relationships? Are we just going out to the club, meeting somebody that look nice, and then we have this low threshold of what it takes for us to start having sex with the person?
And then it becomes just like a sport, whereas you pick up the female, you all go and have sex. Once you have sex, 2 or 3 weeks later, the male gets the call, hey, I'm pregnant.
No commitment there, nothing really to bond you together. And so now you try to figure out how you're going to manage with this child that you're going to bring into the world. And we see young people all the time who don't know who their father is. Literally. Oh, I never met him. And they don't think that they are messed up by it. But of course, they're children and they are adjusting to their surroundings. But it wouldn't have gotten set. God wouldn't have set it up this way if it wasn't necessary.
Right.
It wasn't necessary for you to have a parent, a man figure, and a mother figure to raise you. You know, they were adults. But we are letting this happen, and that's why we have this 70% out of wedlock birth that we just can't let continue. We have to address it. We have to figure out a way to stem it. We got to say, wait a minute, what does it take? Now, if we're waiting on the majority of the community to address it, it's not going to happen.
But that's why I was mentioning earlier, it has to come from our talented team. And if we really look at it, we're being not served by our elders, we're not being served by our educated ones, because if you look at it, everyone is looking toward the president. The president cannot take and make a change in our family.
You made a point. You said the talented 10. Listen, we do believe that the great debate between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington should be revisited. It was an excellent debate. Both of our brilliant men had points, and they were both correct. We knew they were pitted against each other, and one was called this and one was called that. But that was because at the time, then we were still locked out of society, and we thought the W.E.B. Du Bois model was what we should pursue, which was the liberal arts education and develop this 10% of the brilliant among us, and that would, became known as the talented 10th concept. And their job would be to be the entrepreneurial class or the stewards of industry and create jobs for the rest of us, and we would all come in and work with them and whatnot. Well, that worked, except for the 10% or the talented 10th didn't become the stewards and the captains of industry.
Right.
They became somebody's employee.
Right.
And they are today doing their best to working for other people. In other words, our brilliant class, but that's the brilliant class, the 10%. We're not getting any capital from them, any benefit from that brilliant class that we produce in terms of job creation, in terms of the showing us the way. Right. They have been removed from us. We don't see them unless they show up in the Ebony magazine
right.
in a feature and say that he's the president of this or he's the president of that.
Right.
And he's living real nice and they take care of their personal families, and that's great, and we don't want to hate on that. But what we're suggesting is that that's not the way that W.E.B. Du Bois envisioned it.
Right.
And so now we're saying that that talented 10 hasn't responded the way that it should in order to help the poor or those persons who now are being called the permanent underclass.
Right.
And we got to call them into existence. Some kind of way, we have to develop a bridge that can make that talented 10th and that permanent underclass, or the rest of us, have a way in which interaction can take place again.
And when you look at it, that's our biggest problem.
That's the biggest problem.
Because if we connected with those individuals, because you have CEOs that are black that make $100 million a year.
Yes, sir.
And we don't connect with that individual because he's so far away from us that we cannot even realize he's in existence.
The benefit that we get from that intellectual capital doesn't show up. Mm-hmm. And we like to talk about the problems that the permanent underclass has, and we like to point out that, well, they're shooting themselves in their foot.
Right.
That's what I meant by we're starting to criticize ourselves for our problems. Well, if they would just get up and go to work, or well, if they would do, well, see, that's true, but they're suffering from the condition as well. The condition creates that kind of hopelessness. So what we're saying is that the main problem, the biggest problem, is the talented 10 hasn't responded to their duty. You've got to come back into the communities. We've got to create jobs for our community. We've got to use our brilliance. We've got to use the excellent education that we've received. And we've got to create opportunities and salvage and save our community.
And if we don't do that, we're looking at continuing the generational poverty, the generational out of wedlock,
the mass incarceration,
the mass divorce rate,
the high divorce rate. All that's going to continue. So there is a plan for both elements. Yes, the underclass has to do certain things to try to stem the tide so we don't continue it. But the policies to be implemented has to come from us. It has to come from the talented 10. It has to come from the people who understand that you can't set up that way. You can't do these kinds of things. You can't spend all of your money on the big screen TV. You need to purchase some books and have a library, and your books need to cost more than what your entertainment system is at present.
That 43 million people spending $1.1 trillion a year. You go back and deal with those economic issues. We're not pooling our resources.
Absolutely.
Brother and I were talking about a certain group here in our city, Little Rock, going to Las Vegas, and it costs approximately $1,500. Okay, so if you have 100 people going on a trip like that, look at the thousands and thousands of dollars that are being spent on something that's frivolous, whereas they could have networked and communicated in such a way they could have did something with that money to bring about a business.
Absolutely.
That would make a change and a difference in the community in which we live.
Create jobs. That's what we're going to have to do, talented 10. Listen, he referenced the $1.1 trillion. This coming from a study that is done 3 times a year on the spending habits of the African American community. It's done by a Target Research Group and also the Nielsen Corporation. But the Target Research Group actually put the numbers out there as to what we're actually spending. The Nielsen Corporation projects our spending power at $1.1 trillion. So we don't have any reason to have any segment of our communities that's being poor.
No excuse, and that goes back to the pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. We have some boots, we just haven't issued them out to everybody. In our community, we have $1.1 trillion, so there's enough boots to pass around, and then we can pull ourselves.
And guess who's doing the most of that spending? Of course, the middle and the upper class, the talented 10. $3.3 billion is spent yearly on tobacco among us. $3.3 billion. $3 billion is spent on whiskey, wine, and beer. $2.8 billion is spent on sodas.
Drinks, soda, cokes.
Non-alcoholic beverages. We got $3.5 billion spent on toys and games and pets. Listen, y'all, we have the wherewithal. We just don't have the national plan. And we've got to put together a national plan, because the national plan is what's going to impact the permanent underclass, who we have to be responsible for. If we're not responsible for them, no one is going to be responsible for them. They're going to continue to do what is in motion, and that is mass incarceration, and so that we then can have the impact of murder among ourselves at high rates.
And then the family continues to be disintegrated. We don't have the leader, which is the male in the family.
No.
And when you don't have that male leadership, you can just about understand why the male in the classroom is not focused, because he has no firm backing that's pushing him to excel in the classroom. He's in the classroom acting a fool.
Not learning the basics that come from another man. That's how you have to learn certain things. Certain things you can only get from another man, and you can't get them from the mother who's trying to do her best to raise that child. So what they do, they turn to the street, and they get it from another guy on the street as opposed to somebody who truly loves them. So we've got to reverse the trend, and it's going to come from us, the talented 10, those persons who have the education. You have to be called to be responsible for your duty.
Everyone has a duty. Every one of us should be committed to making a difference in our community, because when you go out and reach the status of middle class or upper middle class, or rich as we call it, you still have a responsibility to your people. You cannot just leave them in the abyss of this life.
Or say that the government is supposed to take care of them. And that's what we usually do. We call on the government to support the poor people and the poor class. And here's the language that comes from those who know that that's who the government serves. We need to have government cutbacks. Government is too big.
Conservative.
So that's what they're saying. They know that the poor and the underclass of our people are dependent on government services. And so that's why they say we need to have government cutback. The government's too big. We need to shrink government. And that's all that means. That means that they know that we're dependent too much on government. Now, we don't need to be dependent on government, because we got $1.1 trillion that we can marshal. We can do this, but we can't do it if the level of love for yourself and your people is not there. And we've got to produce some kind of way, the love necessary to give us the commitment to assist in helping our community come up.
And I think that when you look at that big picture, you look at the book by, I believe it's Mr. Bennett.
LeRon?
Yes, sir. Brainwash.
Oh, Brainwash. No, that's, what's the brother name? Yeah, Brainwash. Very good. Tom Burrell.
Tom Burrell, excuse me. And that brother brings out a lot of issues of our sojourn here in America as it relates to being brainwashed. And a lot of times we are in denial about this brainwashing that we have received in America.
And that speaks to what we got to do in terms of allowing for these music corporations to promote the most negative of lyrics and pipe them over these airways to our children. Right. It's as if there is no positive hip hop, and we know that there is. We know that there are positive artists who are putting forth great songs with great lyrics that are uplifting and will make you change your lifestyle if they were repeated.
Right, they're not being played on the radio.
The companies we're allowing to get away, And that's why we need to look into ownership of radio stations, because the radios and what they're playing out here is really helping our community's demise. It's helping our young people normalize bad behavior.
It goes back to that.
Self-destructive behavior.
Yes, sir. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and that's what we have to get out of, because see, once they're young people, and that's why you're giving parents, because you're young, you don't know what's best for you. You're operating on stimulus. You know, whatever the greatest stimulus, that's what you're going to make yourself impressionable. That's why they call young people impressionable, because you're going to move in the direction that's most popular a lot of times. So we got to control that. We got to fight to get the control back of the young people's minds, because we know that they're being promoted all kinds of things that's not healthy for them.
Right, and then when they come to see those things, like in the video games, we had an individual that worked at a fast food establishment in the mall, and he got fired from stealing from the establishment.
Yes.
And then he decided, he and a friend that was a current employee, that they were going to rob the establishment, and they went in to rob them, and they ended up killing both parties, didn't they?
I don't think. I hope that I haven't heard that if that's the case.
Right.
The little girl was shot too, and I hope that she didn't die.
But the male did die,
Yes.
and it would be a horrible act to be able to experience something like that. One of your coworkers, your previous coworkers, to come in with a gun in hand, telling you to give the money up.
And all of us know of these horrible stories, like the one where the little brother that we used to work with, little Bobby,
Right.
They were with their friends just trying to break in cars
Right.
at an apartment complex. And then you get a rogue police officer to come on the scene, and he, instead of trying to arrest them, he shoots up the car.
Right.
Ends up killing one of the young people. And so naturally, one of them died in the commission of a crime,
Right.
and they report it that way, and so it diminishes the impact of that murder.
Right.
And so we have to be a little smarter with the way things are going. And it's all because, and listen, there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a champion for your own people's cause.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
The drum major for justice.
The drum major for justice. And we have to become that. And we didn't do our disclaimer. We at the end of the show. But
notice we didn't even get into that though, as far as speaking.
But it brings to my mind is that a lot of times we are pushed away from pursuing our own best interests because somebody might say that we're racist, or somebody might say that you're homophobic,
Too black.
or somebody might say that you're
Anti-Semitic.
and they chase you away from pursuing what's best for you. It is as if I would charge Brother Maurice with being racist because he doesn't pay my rent. He takes care of his house.
Right.
And I'm saying, brother, you just can't just take care of your house. Why don't you
Take care of mine,
Why don't you
too.
pay mine? You're not right.
And that's where I want to point out today, without no reservations, we need to quit acting as though President Obama is the savior for black people.
Exactly.
I want to put emphasis on that. President Obama is not the savior for black people, so we got to get off of that team thinking that we're going to ride him out, and it's not going to happen, people. I want to point that out.
Now, the way politics work in America is all about leverage.
Right.
And what you can get from the threats that you put on politicians, because if they don't do what you say, you got some way of punishing them.
Right.
Well, we don't have that kind of cohesion. We don't have that kind of understanding of politics in order that we could have literally made Mr. Obama a savior for us if we were in the condition that would have produced it.
The things that we've been talking about earlier on the program.
Yes.
We had unity, we had love,
That's
we
right.
had our talented children working.
And control of our dollars.
Yes, sir.
Where we could stop them and withhold them at any moment.
Yeah.
And say that if this president, if Mr. President, if you don't get this particular initiative out that's going to bring this to our community, then we're not going to be able to support so-and-so with our dollars. Well, because we're the largest so-called minority group in the country, then we should be the most powerful.
Right, consumers. But
We
we're
should-
consumers, but we should be producers.
Right.
We should produce political allies that will push forward our agenda, and we're not doing
And
it.
that's what he means by in our present condition, the way we play politics in this country. Mr. Obama can't do anything. He has to capitulate to whoever the most power is at present.
Right.
And it's not us.
Right.
But we could get in that position is what our point is. And we have to do it by calling you, the talented 10th, to the table and to become what W.E.B. Du Bois said you should be. And that are the stewards of industry, the captains of how we're going to move forward in this country. And just don't sit and be hidden away in corporate America, going on your vacations every year and just looking at the demise of the so-called black community.
No, you should be saying to yourself, what can I do to help?
That's right.
You should be pushing that agenda amongst your peers, the peers that you associate with at those retreats that happen to look like you. You need to get with those individuals and say, hey, look, we need to give back because we came from those communities, because everyone that's in the black community didn't come up or didn't arrive with a silver spoon in their mouth.
Very true. Listen, we hope that we have hit a nerve. We hope that we've said something that makes you at least want to hear from us again, or at least want to call us and schedule us to come into your school or your after-school program and speak with your young people. Again, you can find us. We are MIB. We are Mentors in Blackness. And you can find us at MIBNESS.com. Okay? That's what we want us to do. Look us up, call us. I'm Brother Wayne, this is Brother Maurice, and we hope that you have a great rest of the day. And thanks for tuning in to us. And we'll be back again, God willing. So look for us right here. Let me say to everybody, peace. Peace. Have a great rest of the week.